Welcome to Fox Soul's Black Report, your daily source for Black news, views, and opinions. Today is Friday. We made it to the end of the week. It's June 24th, and I'm Mimi Brown.
And I'm Romeo.
I'm Demi Lobo. And on today's report, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that overturns the abortion protections afforded in Roe versus Wade. We have the details and potential courses of action. Meanwhile, the Supreme Court also voted to strike down a New York law that says who can and can't get a concealed carry permit. We're going to have that story for you. Then, the highest court also made a ruling on Miranda rights, ruling that those that are not warned of their rights to remain silent may not sue a cop, even if that evidence is used against him in court.
Plus, Serena Williams returns to Wimbledon tournament after an injury at her last appearance. And we have Amanda Seals here to give a side eye of the topics of the week. It is Friday. We have all that and so much more. This is our voice and our truth, so let's get it.
Well, as expected, the U.S. Supreme Court is overturning Roe v. Wade. By a vote of 6-3, the High Court sends the abortion rights back to the states. The justices have reversed a law that has been in effect for 50 years.
3 justices named by one president, Donald Trump, were the core of today's decision to upend the scales of justice and eliminate a fundamental right for women in this country.
The decision was expected after a draft opinion of the ruling was leaked a few months ago. About half of the states in the country are expected to outlaw or severely restrict a woman's right to choose. The other states will keep abortion legal. Oh, so we knew this was coming.
We did.
So right now, as it stands, there are 2 Americas. There are the Americas where women have access to abortion rights, like states here in California and the District of Columbia. And then there are other states where, of course, women will not have access to abortion rights. We know that Black and Latino women will suffer the most. One of the most used reasons why people have abortions because they can't financially afford to have another child. So now my question becomes to the states, are they going to expand social safety nets such as access to health care, access to food stamps or whatever people may need, access to jobs? What programs will be in place now that women will have to have these extra children? How will they pay for them? Are they going to help now that they have forced women to sort of continue with their pregnancy? And the thing that shocked me the most that I read today was after the law came down. So for an example, if you had an appointment at 8 a.m., you already had your appointment, you're fine. But if you had an appointment at 10 a.m. and the ruling had already came down, your appointment was canceled.
Absolutely. You know, most states have what's called trigger laws set in place, and we talked about this before, which means that they will automatically ban abortion on Roe versus Wade, like you said, immediately. So the thing about Roe versus Wade being overturned is a couple of facts here is that I was having this really in-depth conversation about this earlier today because it was a guy that asked me, like, why is this a big deal? Like, what is this? Why are Black women so impacted by this? Why do we care about this? So Black women make up 1 in 3 abortions here in the United States. We make up the majority of the abortions that take place. Black women have 3 times as many abortions as our white counterparts. And so what's happening here is because I'm trying to figure out, why do white Republicans care about overturning Roe versus Wade? So what I believe has happening is a vicious cycle of you have white male Republicans who feel like the white demographic is diminishing. So they want to find a way to make people have more children. And so what happens is on the Black and the brown side here, you have Black and brown women, we're dying because we have less access to health care. So if we go through, we have an illegal abortion, we could die. If we go through and have the baby, we could die. So then we're killing the Black and the brown women off, right? So that means that the Black population is going down. On the other hand, you make all women keep their babies. So then the white population in turn is still going up. And so it just seems like a vicious cycle all in all to make the white population just increase while we die on the other side.
I just can't imagine them sitting back just coming up with that so-called master plan because it's so disgusting that you're taking away a woman's right. Imagine women today knowing what their grandparents and great-grandparents went through to fight for something, fight for rights, and now they're being taken away in 2022. Let's talk about the state I grew up in, the state of Missouri, right? Where that's a red state. So if you live in Missouri, you want to go out of state to get an abortion, abortion, if they find out, there's a situation where they could sue you for that. There's also the situation where, do you have the money to travel to another state? Is it going to be safe? Because now we have so many people going to different states, right? The quality of the work may not be the same because the quantity will be high. So we are putting people's lives at jeopardy. So this situation, you know, when they read this today and when it happened, everyone's talking about it, and it's a sad day in this country.
You know, but Romeo, I just have to challenge you for 1 second here, is because you said that you don't see them making a big master plan.
Well, they have a master plan. But I didn't challenge you. What I was basically saying that it's amazing that that someone is actually sitting back and that's how they're thinking.
Right, because I mean, when it comes to voting rights, there's a master plan. There's a master plan for everything. Even them not giving water to residents and making voting rights harder. It's all a master plan for something.
It is, but you know what? But to your point, Demi, it is all a master plan. But we have to get out and vote, because us sitting back and saying, oh, Trump, Hillary Clinton, same people, I'm not going to vote this, sitting it out. This is a consequence to a lot of us not showing up at the poll, because Trump was able to put in place these Supreme Court justices who've been able to overturn a lot of the things that, I mean, they're busy right now. While we're sleeping, they're thinking of ways to overturn and ways to outdo some of the things that Democrats have already put in place. And really quick, on the chopping block as well, I mean, we have to think about in vitro fertilization. We have to think about same-sex marriage. We have to think about contraceptive. Those are things that are also in jeopardy now. Like, we really have to pay attention. I hope Democrats are coming up with a master plan, because Republicans are moving full speed ahead.
And you're absolutely right. They always have the master plan, and we are like reactionary, like we said before. And just I want to make sure our cellmates know here that with this ruling here, this doesn't mean that abortions are not going to happen. We're still going to have to get abortions, but they're going to be illegal and unsafe. And so I hope that, you know, when we talked about voting people in, there also have to be people that are brave enough to fight and brave enough to run for offices like this, because we have to have somebody to vote for that wants to fight for us at the same time.
And they're going to be legal in certain states. They're going to be illegal in some states and legal in others. The states that are legal, they're going to have like a huge backlog of people trying to get in. Absolutely. So we're going to see.
Sorry, as a black woman, we just have to give passion to this story. Absolutely. And in another Supreme Court decision, the court voted 6-3 to strike down a New York law that limits who can get a concealed carry permit and carry a gun outside of your home. So yesterday's ruling, it also applies here in California and a handful of other states with similar gun laws. Now, legal experts, they say the ruling now allows all citizens to be issued permits unless there's a compelling reason to deny them.
The gun laws in 40 of these states are still in place based on the decision. Not good enough, but it's I think it's a bad decision.
The court's decision comes as both houses of Congress passed new gun legislation, with 15 Republicans voting for the Senate bill. While 14 Republicans joined all Democrats on today's House bill, the legislation now heads to President Biden's desk for his signature. So we were definitely talking about this morning as well on our morning show on Power 106. And so what's interesting is in California, it's also there's a city called Riverside, a city called Riverside. And so the county sheriff, Chad Bianco, he immediately, after this ruling, he was like, oh, great. He was like, we thought that President Biden and the government was going to uphold the strongest part of the Constitution. They're like, we are so happy. We're going to make it even easier in Riverside for you to get a gun. And so immediately there were all these people on Twitter and Instagram. They were like, and they were in California, like, oh, we're going to go to Riverside and get a gun. And you would think that the amount of mass shootings that we've seen, that you would have people like him, sheriffs like him, and governors that would want to make less people be able to get a gun, especially at the age 18.
You know, the Supreme Court is contradicting themselves, because what they're saying in this ruling is that it violates the Second Amendment, right? Yes. So therefore, it is unconstitutional. So they're leaving it up to the states to decide if a person should be able to carry a gun or not. But in the ruling, the abortion ruling, it can't be left up to the states. Basically, they have to overturn it. So which is it? You know,
who's going to make the best decision?
Who's going to make the best?
For the American
people? Do what they want when they want. There's no blanket rule. They make it work how their interpretation of the Constitution it goes with however they think it is.
Yeah, and you know, if you walk down the street and you have a conversation with people, a lot of people say, well, what can the president do about this? If he's the man that runs this country, why does he have to go through these steps? It's the way it is. That's why Mimi really said we have to get out and vote who we want in these certain positions. But let's talk about the gun situation. Since the pandemic, we know what percentage of guns have been purchased, right? We understand that even in the black community, people have purchased more guns for safety. You know, we're in inflation. People out there are homeless. There's a lot of issues of why they have a gun in their hand, but we have to control who has the gun in their hand, because obviously we know what the outcome is when that happens.
I'm actually really nervous that when they leave it up to states, to be honest with you. Like, I'm really nervous. Romeo, great point about the president, because I feel like the president should be the one that will make the blanket statement for all states, because when you leave it up to states, depending on how you're feeling that day, depending on who hurt you, upset you, that's how these people in power are making their decisions.
Or who's in your ear.
Exactly, and you just don't know what the ulterior motive is.
Sadly, the president doesn't have that power. There's checks and balances, and he doesn't have that power to be able to say that for all 50 states.
That's true. All right, another important ruling, the Supreme Court is limiting the ability to enforce Miranda rights. The court rules suspects who are not warned of their right to remain silent cannot sue a cop for damages even if the evidence was used against them in court. The court decision cuts back on an individual protections against self-incrimination. It also means a cop's failure to warn a suspect of their rights cannot expose an officer to potential damages during a civil lawsuit. Liberals on the court condemned the ruling. Justice Elena Kagan said the ruling strips people of their ability to seek remedy for violations of their rights recognized in Miranda warnings. So here's another situation where we sit back and we shake our heads. So I just feel like police officers are not being held accountable once again. You know, it happens from the shooting, it happened from this situation. So no matter what or how they handle this, even though there's rules and there's steps to how police are supposed to handle situations when they're arresting someone, pulling them over, they're still protected when it doesn't go right.
Yeah, you know, this case stems from a hospital worker, I believe, who he committed a crime. He admitted to the crime, but he wasn't read his Miranda rights. So after he was found guilty, or innocent, excuse me, he sued the police officer for the arrest. And so the Supreme Court is now saying, listen, if you're not read your Miranda rights, you can't sue. It's just what it is. So it just depends on in certain cases. So in this case, he admitted to it. I don't think he should have sued the police officer, but you can't also make a blanket statement about Miranda rights either. It should go case by case. And right there, what they're saying right now is, listen, even if if we don't read you your Miranda rights, you can still go to jail for whatever the crime is that you did, which, you know, you may not know you're under arrest if you have not been read your Miranda rights.
True.
You know, and just growing up, watching even TV shows, right? Watching cop shows, cop dramas, real life reality shows. You're taught that the Miranda rights is pretty much everything. When you get pulled over, you assume that the Miranda rights is pretty much the Bible that you need to get read before anything happens. And so it kind of diminishes the hierarchy here of Miranda rights. It almost makes you seem like, what do we have it in place for if it doesn't matter if a cop reads it or not? And it also gives police officers so much power to be able to say, oh, well, like you said, Mimi, hey, whatever, I'm just going to send you to jail for whatever I want to. I don't have to give you this honor of giving you your Miranda rights.
I think that's the goal here, though, to give police officers more power. And we're looking at who's making these rules. We're looking at who put these Supreme Court justices in place. Then we know that has been the goal from the very beginning, is to give police officers more control.
More power.
All right. The Uvalde Buffalo mass shootings took the lives of 30 people, and the majority were Black and Latino. These tragic events are reigniting calls from both communities for lawmakers to take action on gun violence. The NAACP says 50% of gun-related homicide victims in this country are Black, and advocates and survivors of gun violence say that in order to help communities of color, racism must first be addressed. Now, when it comes to gun violence in Black communities, it's often assumed to be gang violence, but only 11% of homicides in the Black community are connected directly to gang violence, and 30% are connected to other felonies.
Federal prosecutors are asking a judge to sentence the cop who killed George Floyd to 25 years in prison for violating his civil rights. Prosecutors say Derek Chauvin's actions were cold-blooded and needless as he knelt on Floyd's neck, ultimately killing him. Back in December, Chauvin pled guilty to violating Floyd's civil rights. As part of that plea deal, Chauvin's lawyers and federal prosecutors agreed that the former police officer should be facing 20 to 25 years in prison.
A Georgia councilman who promised to quit after his city granted a business license for a Confederate store to reopen kept his promise this week. Kennesaw City Councilman Doc Eaton's last day was Tuesday. He says he could not be a part of a city government that allows a store that pushes hate to exist in his city. Wildman Civil War Surplus has been open since 1971, but it closed in January when the store owner, Dent Myers, died. The shop is full of Ku Klux Klan memorabilia and other offensive material. Members of the community came to Eaton's last hearing to tell council people why they support or have problems with the city allowing the shop to reopen.
And the Biden administration is granting some student loan debt cancellations to settle a past lawsuit over alleged fraudulent claims. The agreement gives $6 billion to about 200,000 borrowers attending mostly for-profit institutions. The agreement covers more than 150 schools, including the now closed ITT Technical Institute, DeVry University, and the University of Phoenix.
2 children sentenced to youth prison in Louisiana are being transferred to another facility in Alabama. The problem is no one told the kids' parents. Advocates for incarcerated youth say Louisiana's Office of Juvenile Justice has given up on its responsibility to care for and rehabilitate children in its care. The move comes after 20 juveniles took over some parts of a youth center in Monroe. Governor John Bel Edwards ordered guards from adult prisons to help staff get the facility under control.
Facebook parent company Meta is agreeing to revamp the way the social network targets the advertising system after the company was accused of allowing landlords to market their housing ads in discriminatory ways. The Department of Justice agreed to the settlement that requires Facebook to overhaul its powerful internal ad targeting tool. Federal officials say the lookalike audience tool allowed advertisers to target housing ads by race, gender, religion, and other characteristics. The settlement stems from a 2019 Fair Housing Act lawsuit filed by the Trump Justice Department. The DOJ says Facebook helped enable housing discrimination on its app.
And a group of Houston residents traveled by bus to the Texas state capitol this week to demand changes in how the state deals with environmental issues that impact people of color. Activists say the Texas Commission on Environmental Quality does nothing to fight environmental racism. The Houston area, like other places in America, has a toxic waste area right next to the Black and Latino neighborhoods. Now, those toxic sites are called cancer clusters because the high rate of cancer infecting residents in those areas. For more than a year, a Union Pacific rail yard in a Black historic Houston neighborhood has had a toxic chemical problem that has caused residents there to suffer from cancer.
A Black woman who has never held political office is making history in Alabama. Yolanda Flowers is the first Black woman to win the Democratic nomination for governor. But she beat out State Senator Malika Sanders Fortier, another Black woman. Flowers, who was worked in academia for over 20 years, will take on incumbent Governor Kay Ivey in November. Ivey is favored in the Ruby Red State.
Fred Goldman, the father of the man who was killed along with the ex-wife of O.J. Simpson, is refiling his wrongful death lawsuit against the former football star. Goldman won a judgment in 1997 for $33.5 million from Simpson. O.J., who was acquitted in the deaths of Ron Goldman and Nicole Brown Simpson in 1995. Goldman says Simpson has never paid him. With interest, Goldman says O.J. now owes him $97 million.
And former Florida gubernatorial candidate Andrew Gillum says he is a victim of a political scheme. He was arrested yesterday on charges of misusing campaign funds. Gillum and Sharon Letman Hicks, who is head of the National Black Justice Coalition, has been charged with 19 counts of wire fraud. Now, Gillum was also charged with lying to the FBI. If convicted, he faces up to 20 years in prison.
A Florida man was exonerated after being in prison for 31 years after a crime he did not commit. But he won't be getting anything from his years behind bars. Under Florida law, Thomas Raynard James should qualify for more than $1.5 million for the 1991 wrongful conviction in the home invasion murder of an elderly Miami man. But the law has a provision that disqualifies him. State officials say that Thomas was ineligible because he was convicted of another crime before he was sentenced to life in prison in 1991. Florida's clean hands provision precludes those who committed crimes while in prison and before they were wrongfully convicted from being paid. Man, this story is heartbreaking. There is currently a GoFundMe with a $100,000 goal. Right now it's at $51,000, which is not nearly enough. But I struggle with this story a little bit because is it fair? No, it is not fair that he spent 31 years in prison is such a very long time that to be wrongfully convicted of that standalone, he should be entitled to that money. But if this was already set in place and he was convicted of another crime before that, if that's the law, I don't know what we can do about that. Is there something else?
I don't know if there's something we can do about
missing?
that. The fact still remains this man was in jail for 31 years.
Absolutely.
It doesn't matter what he did because what he didn't do was the crime that he was in jail for
Yes.
31 years.
Agreed.
And we don't know, he could have sold marijuana. We
Yeah.
know that the marijuana laws were different back then. You know, the disparities of crack cocaine to marijuana to whatever it may be. We have no idea. I'm just guessing what he could have done. But at the end of the day, they stole 31 years from his
Yes.
life,
Yeah.
and he deserves to be compensated for
I
that.
agree. You know what? Talking about 31 years that he cannot get back. Although freedom is priceless, I do understand that. He should be compensated in some form or fashion.